Welcome. So I figured I'd kick up something a little new here, also something a little old, I guess, in some respects. We'll see how this goes and decide on whether it's going to continue after about 6 parts. Think of this as a pilot. So this show is intended to be the continuation of my old Q&A series. If you are unfamiliar or a fairly new fan, way back in the day, particularly as Guild Wars 2 was coming out and leading up into Season 1, I used to do very regular questions and answers productions where you guys would ask me something, I'd give you my thoughts, and it came at a particularly good time for the Guild Wars franchise as a lot of people were coming in, didn't know all the juicy details that I had already learned from playing Guild Wars 1 for so many years. It was a very regular series. In fact, so regular, there was a time in my life where coming home from work, getting off the train, the first thing I'd do before I ate or did any kind of relaxing would be to go produce a Q&A video. That was my routine for ages, and it was a lot of fun. In recent years, I've not really done Q&As, mostly because I had been streaming. And my style, as it so happens while I'm live, is to pretty much constantly look at chats and try to respond to people and answer their various questions, which could be very repetitive, very stressful at times as well, because there's no, filtering going on. And then I just have no enthusiasm on the rest of the channel to produce Q&As anymore, which is a real shame considering magnitudes, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands more people watch me on YouTube than on Twitch. So I kind of regret that, and since I'm not streaming at the moment, I want to bring it back. The other thing that's happened recently is with the End of Dragons trailer coming out, I've seen so many cool theories and ideas and had my own reflections on the lore in particular that I wanted to platform them. We've done 3 videos over the past 2 weeks discussing the trailer and coming back for more rounds of discussion where you guys bounce off of what I've said after I've bounced off of what you've said, and it's been really fun. So I want to bring the idea of a Q&A back, but keep some of that really cool stuff we had going on those recent End of Dragons trailer discussions. And that's what this is. I'm not just going to be taking direct questions at me, but anything that looks very intriguing or I think I have a profound response to of any kind down in the comments, I'll highlight and respond to in these videos so that we get a real discussion going. That's the idea. And so the title, for now, I don't know whether this will go on after the pilot, because I kind of hate this title, but I've called it The Floor, which is, it's the floor of discussion, right, guys? I know it also kind of sounds like, this is the bottom of the pile, we're at rock bottom here, it's the floor, but I kind of like that. Maybe people will be clicking on it purely out of curiosity in the weeks and months to come, wondering why I'm just doing so many videos of something called The Floor. If you guys have any real suggestions for other names, you can feel free to pause right now and drop them down below. One final thing I thought might be nice too is I'd like each part to be kind of oriented around a specific topic. So the topic right now is clearly End of Dragons and what we think about this mother character and all that stuff. But there's going to be infinite comments in response to what I say, to which I could infinitely respond. It will end up getting a bit circular. So there has to be these lines in the sand, these moments where we say, okay, let's move on and talk about something else now. Maybe next time we'll be talking about ArenaNet's prospects as a studio. We'll talk about Guild Wars 1. We'll talk about fan projects such as The Last Day Dawns that's going on. There can be mechanical discussions like what we think about MMO raiding and how Guild Wars 2 ties into that. Or of course, other lore topics. Maybe one day I just throw out, alright guys, let's talk about the Wizard's Tower. We haven't properly talked about the Wizard's Tower for years since I did a Guild Wars 2 Mysteries on it. Here's some stuff, and then, we'll have that be the topic. So I don't know whether it'll be like a couple of episodes where we bounce back on the topic and then we swap. That's what the pilot is for, to work out those kinks. I'm thinking particularly, you guys can respond in the comments down there to what we're currently talking about, or you can propose your own new topic. And as you do so, actually give some weight and some text and some thought to it so that we've got a good, platform to jump off from. I think that would work best. And to everyone, whether you like commenting or not, use the thumbs up, thumbs down system. That didn't exist when I very first started doing Q&A videos, but is really useful for the cool stuff, or at least the stuff that I know is resonating with all of you. That maybe I can respond to. Quite a lot of the time, people thumb up stuff that is kind of boring or what has already been discussed in a video recently or that exact video. So, I can ignore those. I'm not going to be purely tunnel visioning thumbs up and thumbs down. But I think they'll be helpful and you guys can share and we can make this kind of a collaborative thing. We'll see how this run of pilot videos works out. I'm thinking of uploading them over the next couple of weeks or so. And if they go well, we'll go on with it. Right, so the honor of the first one comes from Pan Belacqua, who said in response to our discussion about the deep sea dragon and Mother and what the trailer was getting at, said, my current hope for the deep sea dragon is that it is tamed. Now, if you guys remember, we had discussed this idea. I talked about maybe the expansion starts and the dragon is defeated in some way, and I said that doesn't necessarily mean it's dead. I just want the Canthons to look strong in the idea that they've domesticated it somehow. Domestication is probably not the right term, right? That's something that happens over generations. Anyway, last we saw, Cantha's story was very much a political one. A xenophobic, militaristic faction has radicalized the populace and turned them against outsiders. I think that that story hasn't been done yet, is a true alliance between mortals and a dragon. Sure, we have the Sons of Svanir, but the Icebrood saga has made it pretty clear that they are being played for fools by an entity far smarter than them. And I'd actually go so far as to say, not even just Icebrood saga, always, it's kind of been that idea that they're being played for fools. If Empire of the Dragon has allied itself with the Deep Sea Dragon and is willingly going along with what it wants for the sake of a shared cause, I think that'd be really interesting. Canthons were the first people to tap into mist magic at a time when the world had very little magic due to a previous dragon rise. If the Empire of the Dragon, I mean the name is right there, allied with the Deep Sea Dragon before, while it was sleeping, likely via an emissary, that could explain, one, why the Emperor's death released so much magic gifted to the leader of the Canthons by the Deep Sea Dragon, why Canthons were able to tap into mist magic so early, as if the Deep Sea Dragon was offering them an alternative source of power for that period when magic was low, why Cunavang was allied with the mortals, she's still obeying her master, and the Empire's name in the first place. Sure, Canthons may not have killed the dragon, but the idea that their government is so corrupt that it's working with some ancient horror and working to sacrifice the rest of Tyria to it in order to save themselves is incredibly fun to me. We know that they're xenophobic, a very us-first nation. I don't think it would be a huge leap to assume that they would see saving Cantha through a pact with the Deep Sea Dragon as a worthy reward for giving away the rest of the world. So, I'm actually much more aligned with this than I think most people would expect. I noticed some responses to this message where people say, no, existing lore contradicts this. It doesn't really. So we have heard that at the Harvest Temple where the Jade Wind began, it was a ceremony to do with Dwayna's power, you know, and Dwayna is the goddess of life, and obviously way back when, ArenaNet had no idea of the Elder Dragons and stuff, and they just wrote this idea of Dwayna because it's a harvest ceremony, it's for a bountiful harvest, so we want, you know, lots of life for our crops and stuff. Obviously that's what they were going for, but multiple times over the past decade, we've seen the new writers, you know, kind of jury-rig old pieces of information into the new story in really compelling ways that don't mean any kind of retcons happened. And I think this is totally possible that this could happen here. Yeah, we heard the Dwayna comment, but if this was true, if this was really what ArenaNet was going for, this would be like a very grand conspiracy that is extremely well hidden. And so, of course, the propaganda, the official story of where the hell this power or magic's coming from, they'd say it was Dwayna. Or you don't even have to think it's some kind of conspiracy. You could just say the Canthons saw that this festival, no matter how it was working now, perhaps the original information of where all of this tradition came from had been lost to time. They simply see, we do this, there is life, we believe in a god of life, so clearly it's Dwayna, and that's just their own misinterpretation. It would totally work. And yes, I do think that one of the things that End of Dragons can do is tie the Jade Wind into the story of the Elder Dragons, because the scale of that disaster is totally proportional to the scale of what the Elder Dragons do. They might not go all the way with it. I do want to bring you guys' attention back to the Cataclysm in Ore. That's not the raising of Ore, Zaitan did that, but the sinking of Ore. You know, they kind of vaguely breadcrumb an idea that maybe it's related to Zaitan. You know, the Vizier Kilbron got the Lost Scrolls that were forbidden knowledge, and that was below Ara, and then separately we hear that the gods had moved a load of dragon artifacts beneath Ara as well. So there's like a suggestion, but it's not direct. And of course, when Kilbron executed the Cataclysm, he became a Lich, and he had this power over the undead and stuff, and the Staff of Oral came into it, which is all kind of, you know, undead themey, and then Zaitan coincidentally is the undead themey dragon in the same area of the world. But they don't pull on the threads to tie the knot. You might see ArenaNet does a similar thing here with the Jade Wind, but they could. I wouldn't be too sad to see it, even if it does mean we're kind of going in circles on the same stories we dealt with a long time ago. Another side of the Jade Wind that is very much like Elder Dragon-y is the corruption element of it. You got to consider that there are still salt sprays around, but they were corrupted, and their form of corruption doesn't seem to be like, you know, the Bloodstone Fend corruption, this madness that makes you hungry for magic all the time. It just seemed to make everyone angry, but a form of corruption nonetheless. A really compelling thing here as well is the Echovald Forest, where, if I'm remembering rightly, in Guild Wars 1, when you're in Echovald, the Wardens are all fighting you. But curiously, unlike, say, with the Salt Sprays, they're not fighting you because they're corrupted. They weren't corrupted. They're just mad that you ruined their forest. And they don't like humans because they blame you for what had happened. And so why is that cool? Well, if you adhere to the whole Sylvari and Wardens are one and the same, there was just another pale tree in Cantha. If you adhere to that, then that works out perfectly, because what do we know about the Sylvari? That they are immune to dragon corruption. Only their own dragon, so to speak, could affect them. Morgemoth, Zaitan couldn't, and if this is the Deep Sea Dragon's work with the Jade Wind, then yeah, the Deep Sea Dragon wouldn't be able to either. The one big snag is Kunavang. So if Kunavang is meant to be like the champion of the Deep Sea Dragon, and it's all related somehow, the Deep Sea Dragon was under there, you gotta understand that Kunavang herself was corrupted and kind of maddened. So why would that have happened? Well, maybe we can worm our way through it. Maybe Kunavang is really, really like Glint. Do you remember the story of Glint? She was just a straight-up champion of Kralkatorrik. Then the Forgotten came along and said, oh, look, we've made this altar of glass. Let's tamper with things, blah, blah, blah. And they save Glint. They cleanse Glint. Well, what if there's another side to this story? They cleanse Glint, and then they're like, okay, let's go cleanse Kunavang as well. And we don't realize it. When we play the Arar Explorable story and we go to the Altar of Glorst and stuff, it's called the Altar of Glorst, and it's all about Glint. But cunningly, there's this whole other part of the story where Kunavang was brought there as well. She was cleansed. Then years later, when the Jade Wind happened, she was re-corrupted. And then you have to ask how the heroes of Guild Wars 1 cleansed her without an Altar of Glorst. It's a mess, but there's some things that I think the devs can do. We'll see how deep they go with it. Right, so next comment. We might have a bit of a problem here. I was thinking of this series being roughly 20 minutes. We're already 1/4 of an hour in, and I'm only on the second response. Right, so Kyle says, so let's say they attack Lion's Arch. The wall in the Domain of Winds gets damaged, and then the Tengu become less isolated. B-side, because it's a direct attack on them. So I do think this is a plausible way in which the Tengu could be integrated into this next expansion. I am still a massive, massive fan of the Tengu becoming playable in this X-Pack. I haven't done a proper discussion with you guys about why I think that's so important about getting new players for a long time, but I think it is of paramount importance. Of course, the new race doesn't have to be Tengu. I just think that they're most appropriate. All that said, though, the Tengu are a weird one because they've kind of been, it feels like, paired with Primordis in some ways. And that feels kind of tacked on and strange. But I just wonder how we move out of Icebrood Saga. If you, as we saw a couple of comments recently, if you're one of these believers that Primordis will have a big part of Icebrood Saga, then maybe it's going to be a whole other reason why the Tengu get involved with us and start working on things. Because maybe we've liberated them or they've asked for help or something already because of Primordis' activity. I don't think it's a big deal. It's just that in 2012, you know, you see destroyers around their gates. And there is that Renown Heart in Kessex Hills where I'm pretty sure the NPC specifically talks about them being inside as well. So I recently mentioned that the Deep Sea Dragon could have been under the sea. I even did in this video. Over 9,000 Demon Furbies says, nice name, I don't think the Deep Sea Dragon could even possibly be in the Jade Sea. From the lore we got from the Lagos and the Quag, and the Deep Sea Dragon pushed it out to shallower waters, so it doesn't make sense. I disagree with this, I really do. First of all, the Jade Sea has already been melting, so it could have been there and its minions could escape, but it's too vast to, or it could have fully escaped at some point. You know, we're working with a 250-year window here. It can be trapped for parts of that, and it can be able to move for other parts of that. You've also got to consider all the ways in which the Elder Dragons do things without moving themselves. Like, think about Zaitan. He roosted in ore, he rose ore when he woke up, and then he didn't move until we defeated him. How he influenced the world was by spreading his risen around. Jormag also, I would say, has been fairly stationary as an Elder Dragon, but is able to influence things from very far, especially if you ascribe to the idea that the Kodan are from super, super far up north. So I do think that the Deep Sea Dragon could be there and still able to affect things. The devs have got a weird thing going on where the 2012 Movement of the World article, sorry, 2010 Movement of the World article, talks about tentacles coming from lakes and all this kind of stuff, but it was never shown anywhere, and no NPCs ever talk about it. I do want to remind you guys that during the Heart of Thorns expansion, there is a little mention of the Deep Sea Dragon when you are doing one of the Exalted challenges. Remember, they throw Risen at you and minions of various Elder Dragons, and then there's that one cool moment where there's like just salty water floods into the room, but there's nothing there. Then you've got other weird stuff like the Inquest seem to have managed to get one of the minions, as they had a big specimen that wouldn't fit in the chamber at the Crucible of Eternity. So there's little hints, but nothing on the scale that the Movement of the World had talked about. The devs of End of Dragons can do whatever they like, and I think, yeah, the dragon could be in the Jade Sea, as long as it's got ways to get its minions out, whether that be through underground tunnels or, you know, overland. It all depends on the state of Cantha itself here. And again, whether the people there are in an allegiance with it. If you do believe in that whole idea, then they just let these creatures roam wherever they want, which is really interesting. Ewan makes a comment here that I think is so important, and I often want to smash my hand down and, you know, rattle people that I find in the comments and on the forums and on Reddit who do not understand this. It is interesting, if you count the main enemies of Guild Wars 2 as of right now, there have been 3 Elder Dragons we have fought, and 4 non-dragon related enemies. Balthazar, Cordicus, Scarlet, and Gw2. Yes, this dragon story is weaved into these 4 enemies, but Guild Wars 2 has actually had us fight non-dragon related enemies more than Elder Dragons. So, I don't know whether I really believe that Cordicus was a big antagonist on the level of, say, Gw2. In a way, he was. You know, Gw2 only got 3 episodes. I remember during Season 4 being amazed that we killed Gw2 as early as we did. I still kind of think that Season 4 should have been 6 episodes on Gw2, and then now, the Icebrood Saga, we should be in the Kralkatorrik arc now. I still kind of believe that, really. It would have given us more time to dig in on things. Overall, obviously, I think ArenaNet's done an incredible job over the past year and a half, but that was an option. Anyway, Cordicus kind of got 3 episodes as well. The Crichton Civil War was kind of a 3-episode thing. So, Cordicus may be pending. It's definitely true that Balthazar was a huge antagonist. Scarlet was a huge antagonist. Hell, if you break down the personal story itself, you can see other pretty prominent antagonists. Gw2 is probably head of them. And really what I want to do is express and reinforce this comment, because one of the biggest criticisms I find about Guild Wars 2's story at the moment is people saying, oh, I'm bored of dragons. I'm not interested in the dragon story. You'd be surprised. I remember every time we've done one of these phases about another character, people seem to tune out completely to the point where they don't even remember these arcs happened later. I don't know what that says about a post-Elder Dragons world, you know, after End of Dragons is done. But I do want to point out, I don't think that this game gets enough credit. I think if you just say, oh, it's just about fighting Elder Dragons and I'm bored of that now, oh my god, that's kind of lame. I saw a comment, I was looking at Season 2 trailers like 3 days ago, and I saw an old comment on a Season 2 trailer. It was for like Tangled Paths release or something, where someone on YouTube had the response, wow, they're going for dragons this slow, it's going to be like 10 years before it's all done. And it's kind of funny because that was half a decade ago now. But if they do End of Dragons, it won't have taken them 10 years to get at it. I just think people should think much harder about what story it is that ArenaNet's given us so far and what they really want. Because I kind of feel like the I'm getting bored of dragons comment line is a bit of a scapegoat. Even when the story's not revolving around them, you still might not like it, and it's better to figure out that reason, the real reason why, instead of talking about dragons being boring. I think ArenaNet's integrated dragons and regular enemies very thoroughly. Great comment here to highlight as well from Sky. Just remember, Bubbles won't be the same Bubbles that woke up all that time ago. Bubbles, by the way, not a phrase I've heard much since the expansion came out. It feels like people don't like the jokey forum name anymore. They want to talk about it seriously, and it's the Deep Sea Dragon. I see Steve more than Bubbles, to be honest. 3 out of 6 dragons are dead, and Bubbles should have taken on their attributes. Very good point. I think about this a lot when I think about Prime Orders too. The Ember Bay release back in Season 3 is really interesting to look back on, because there were all kinds of like vine-touched destroyers. The devs actually went quite deep with that. And as well, Bitterfrost Frontier had a whole moment where they showed off this hybrid boss that Jormag has. I'm really surprised that in the Icebrood Saga so far, we haven't seen hybrid dragon minions be a bigger thing. And hell, even in Path of Fire, I don't think they did hybrid dragons and, you know, the Season 4 equivalent stuff as much as I would have expected. But yeah, it's true, the Deep Sea Dragon could have taken these attributes. I think it's a good point. I will be a contrarian for a second and say, you know, if this character, the Deep Sea Dragon, was far enough away, then it might not have really cross-pollinated much. There's a lot of water out there. We've been assuming that it's swimming around Cantha, but it might not have even been anywhere near Cantha. In theory, they could have done a Cantha expansion that had nothing to do with this dragon. It's been off in these super mysterious places that were only hinted at on the Dermid Priory map. Some of those locations, remember, we did have written trade lanes and the idea and suggestions that there were civilizations living near them. So those are the kind of places we might go after the dragons are done. But the Deep Sea Dragon could have been anywhere, may not have got that magic. One thing that I've always been fascinated about, and I've not talked in any video about, is a completely alternate route for delivering the order of this game's story. So what we saw was in 2012, stupid nerds found some ludicrously well-hidden hints, and within just a couple of weeks were posting about a 6th Elder Dragon called Morgemoth because of the hint in Crucible of Eternity. And those losers ruined it for everyone and made stupid YouTube videos that meant everyone knew, even if they didn't, you know, figure out for themselves. And so what ArenaNet did was they said, well, okay, the first expansion will be about this dragon. Their kind of big mystery was blown to a certain extent, right? So they paid off on it and they chose Morgemoth first. That's cool. I do wonder another world, though, where they held off on that. And they left them as hints, and they let, you know, Wooden Potatoes on YouTube have his theory, but don't confirm it. Don't do anything with Morgemoth. And instead, they could have picked the Deep Sea Dragon for the first expansion. End of Dragons could have been years ago. If you think about it, the Deep Sea Dragon is also a mystery dragon, was at that time less of a mystery than Morgemoth. The Deep Sea Dragon we had very little evidence for, Morgemoth we had very little evidence for, but at least they were candid about the Deep Sea Dragon existing. And then you've got the beautiful thing as well, the Ore, where we destroyed a dragon and all of its magic leaked out, is on a peninsula, surrounded by water, close to the unending ocean. And I really like the idea of the Deep Sea Dragon, like some enormous kraken, slithering over to the ruins of Ore to drain what Zaitan had. And now it's strong and, you know, then all of a sudden that becomes the story. And remember Scarlet destroying Lion's Arch? Well, hell, maybe Scarlet had nothing going on there. Lion's Arch is still destroyed in Season 1, but it's because of a tidal wave again. This one caused by the Deep Sea Dragon and the Hydras and stuff. There's like a whole other angle that could have gone, and it would only be now in 2020 they finally confirm Morgemoth is real. Can you imagine the hype if we'd had to wait all these years for that payoff? It's an interesting thought. Great comment from Simon here. We already have a giant in a Canthan-style location subdued, the Clifftop Fractal, Cliffside. What if one half of Cantha has managed to trap and chain up the Elder Dragon, while the other half are trying to free it from the same reasons that the Commander is? That we need dragons for consuming magic. I really like this. Yeah, we shouldn't forget, it's pretty much confirmed that Fractal is set in Cantha. I think it was mentioned that this is like super duper ancient history. But that guy's a mystery, and how he ties into the Elder Dragon story, if at all, I mean, this could even predate that, will be fun to witness. It's going to be interesting as well with the Sunqua Peak coming. We actually have 2 fractals kind of set in that region of the world, and people don't think about Cliffside enough, you know, as it's been a little bit of a taster. I especially like the idea that Cliffside, these are the fractals, right? So they kind of reinterpret the islands of reality. I like the idea that that fractal is almost like poetry, like it's a metaphor for what is really happening. You know, the giant is simply a representation of the Deep Sea Dragon, and that really is the story, that they've managed to subdue it. Again, I know not everyone's on board, and you guys can happily leave your arguments and your cases down below. Maybe I'll platform them in the next part, that, you know, the dragon should be terrorizing them rather than the other way around. But I like that idea of the cliffside. Our Lock-in says, you mentioned the stakes of the game story could be much lower after the End of Dragons. I think this would be an incredible thing to see the story of Guild Wars focus much more on human mortal problems after the nearly cosmic threat of the Elder Dragons. I think personal, community, and region-based conflict lends itself to a story that is so much more focused on characters that we've grown to care about. I think that's one of the main draws of the Icebrood saga, actually. While Jormag is scheming and influencing events in the background, the majority of the conflicts we've experienced in the saga are interpersonal. I asked you in a past Q&A on Patreon what sorts of stories and stakes you'd like in your ideal game. I'd very much like to hear about that. So, I think my answer to what my ideal game stakes are, I think I'll buy anything. I just don't think you can mix and match, all right? So maybe I'm really enjoying like super grand high level sci-fi. Sci-fi I actually think is the most compelling to me because it includes, if you want it to, all the experiences and stylings of real modern life, but also everything that will come after it. And the numbers and scale of dealing with like interplanetary wars and stuff is just so vast to me. It feels much more exciting and grandiose than even anything Guild Wars 2 has done, right? But it doesn't have to be. I'll also accept a story that is one man's struggle with learning to fry an egg. Do you know what I mean? If that is the whole story, if the entire product is around this guy's frustration and he keeps breaking the yolk, or he heats the oil up too much and it spits and burns his chest or whatever, I can get engrossed in that. I really can. I don't think there's any bad ideas. There's just bad executions of ideas. Where it gets messy is if you've given me a very grand story about the disintegration of reality, i.e. Guild Wars 2 during Season 4, and now you're asking me to sympathize with Emperor Yusoko's struggle to fry an egg, I'm gonna get lost there. You know, there's a real step up that's been happening with Guild Wars over the years, where they can keep compelling you and making you feel excited because they keep trumping the previous threat. And, you know, that's been happening since Prophecies, all the way up through Nightfall and then Eye of the North and beyond. And I think after End of Dragons, if this really is the end of the Dragons storyline, and I don't, this is so ludicrous, guys, because there's a lot of dragons still out there. But when we get there, the idea of how to step down, I don't really know how the devs will do that. I think it could be good. I'm just not sure. There's obviously a lot of lore that I'm really interested in. Like when we got the Bastion of the Penitent, that's still one of my favorite story threads and conclusions to a story thread that the devs have ever done. There's still the Wizard's Tower out there. There's any number of things from Guild Wars 1. There's all these other regions of the world where they can be truly creative and just get away from the shackles of this franchise. But I think that they do have to be careful about it. The one thing I would say is the topic of having actual Guild Wars again. Oh, I'm so tired of seeing people suggest this. Please, if you are someone who does that, make a case for yourself. Please, I would love to show it in the next part. Make a case for why having actual Guild Wars come back matters. Because as far as I can see, people just see the title of the games and they say, oh, there's not any Guild Wars in that. By the way, this happened in Guild Wars 1 as well, because GVG wasn't necessarily war. They were just conflicts between guilds. The Guild Wars were ending in pre and were done. They weren't a part of the Guild Wars story, even in the first game. And so people are like, oh yeah, we'll move away from the dragons and we'll have actual Guild Wars again. What are you talking about? Why is that so fundamentally important and going to be amazing? Just because it was in the title, you have to give me something more. I think you're right to identify that in recent years, they've been more interpersonal with the stories they deliver. My biggest issue so far is I haven't ever really connected with the cast since Season 1. I mean, I've had highlights. I really liked Canuck for a while. I really liked Ritlock for a while. I really liked Gorick when he was in it a lot. I thought that Timey was super well used during Path of Fire. But in general, I don't think I'd really care about what happens to these characters or what they want or how they feel. I don't. And so when you get cutscenes like Timey revealing her illness is accelerating at the end of Season 4, it doesn't really move me. Does that mean after End of Dragons we'll be dealing with that story? I can't say that I'm actually excited about that right now. And finally, to round out today's episode of The Floor, we have Alexander L, who says, it'd be interesting if Balthazar's true intent in fighting the dragons was to try to free Lissa from maybe the Deep Sea Dragon's control. This was actually in response to me talking about how this is the Deep Sea Dragon, and we have the two watery dragons on the logo, and Lissa's got all these mysteries. Devin says Lissa is the god of illusion and manipulation, so it'd be strange if she was the one being controlled. And I do agree. I don't think that necessarily Lissa is immune to being a pawn, but she definitely feels more like the puppet master than the puppet, and I wouldn't want to see that be tampered with too much. But I do think Lissa is important in this expansion for another reason that I didn't mention before, and that is her mirror. I really want to see ArenaNet properly clean up why Balthazar had the mirror, what their little collaboration was there. I think I'd like to see it sooner rather than later as well, because what we're actually talking about, guys, is fundamental information missing from Season 3 stuff. And that's getting to be years ago now. A lot of people are starting to forget that, but it's like this big hole, and I don't like that hole there, and I want to be able to go back and watch, you know, the cutscene where Lazarus turns into Balthazar, and I want to be like, I understand this. This makes sense to me. This was a cool beat. But that twist right now just feels like really manufactured and fake, because we haven't got the story underneath. And so I do want to see Lissa for that. Sidebar as well, I still want to see more about Menzies and the Shadow Army, further than the very cryptic little things we might have maybe got during Path of Fire. I get it, it's all God stuff and we're dealing with dragons, so I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't happen. So there you have it, guys. That is the first part. Can I just say, today, we've obviously been talking purely about an upcoming Guild Wars 2 expansion, and we've been talking about lore and stuff, and I know you guys really like me talking about lore, but I do want to be clear that I don't just want this series to be lore discussion. If you want to promote a topic for the next part that is even on just very big, broad MMO philosophy ideas, gameplay stuff, whatever, I am receptive and keen to that. I want to prove to you guys that I have worthwhile things to talk about that's not just Guild Wars 2 lore. So yeah, if you've got an idea, give it a bit of weight, a bit of heft, and then between you and me, we can convince people that there's a lot of fun stuff to say, and we'll go forward. So thank you guys. Let me know on any of this. Give people your thumbs up, and I'll see you on the next one very soon. I'm committing to about 6, and we'll see how we're looking at the end of that.